Hello and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. My name is Matt Quinn and this is In the Roud, a folk song podcast. Join me as we travel through the world of traditional folk song, one song per episode, in the order they appear in the Roud Index. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. We're now in the middle of Season 3 and this is Episode 5. This week we're looking at the song labelled Roud 25, which is Child Ballad number 9, The Fair Flower of Northumberland. Later on we'll hear from our singer guest Alasdair Roberts, but for now let's take a look at the history with a brand new contributor here at In the Roud, Sandra Kerr. Well, hello and a big first time welcome to In the Roud, Sandra Kerr. Hello.
Hello there, Matthew.
Hi, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, and I'm delighted to have been asked to take part in your venture. I think what you're doing is wonderful, so fair play to you.
Oh, thank you. You can come again. You can come back more often and keep telling me what I'm doing is great, and then no, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you to say, and yeah, great to have you here, and glad you're doing well. So, we are here today to talk about Roud number 25, which is Child Ballad number 9, The Fair Flower of Northumberland, which I was aware of this song, and I've heard people sing it before, actually. So, recently there have been songs on the podcast. We've had, 2 weeks ago we had Gil Brenton, and last week we had Linton, two really unknown sort of child ballads, because, not really found in oral tradition at all. And I really didn't know anything about them, but in the case of, we're back to, at least for me, familiar territory now with this one, because I'm pretty good awareness of this song anyway. So start us off as we always do with a sort of summary of the song. What's the song about and the plot of the song? What are we dealing with here?
Okay, what we're dealing with, incidentally, there are other titles, including The Heiress of Northumberland and The Provost's Daughter, because, as you know, and as we'll go into at some point, there are far more Scots versions of this ballad than there are English, but it has one or two other titles.
And as we found out, as we did a brief scan of the Roud Index before we started recording, and we found a version called Fair Eleanor, I think, as well, didn't we? So there's that as well.
That was a new one on me. I shall have to look that up, or you can tell me all about it after. Yeah. But yes, that too. So we have other titles, but in broad outline, with the occasional bit of detail, this is what it's about. A Scottish knight is put in prison by the Earl of Northumberland. Okay, there's one very interesting description of the prison, or where this prisoner is held. It was a place where he could not walk nor lie along. That's a bit scary. Somewhere he couldn't walk about and he couldn't lie down. Sounds awful.
You basically, it's in a cell that's so thin you have to stand upright. It's sort of that.
Yeah, absolutely, it's not a good place.
As if solitary confinement couldn't be any worse.
Wasn't bad enough. Absolutely, Matthew. So there he is. Of course, the Earl's daughter, or the Provost's sweet daughter, walks by and he begs her to release him. He begs her, crying salt tears, says one of the versions. So you know that he's really upset. She says, no, I can't let you go. You're a foe. You're one of our foes. You're an enemy. I can't let you go. But he says, oh, no, no, I'm not a foe. I'm here because of your sweet love. So he tries to con her that he's actually not a robber or a reaver or one of the clans that's constantly over the border, pillaging and all the rest of it. He says that he's there because he loves her. Oh, dear. No, but she says, I bet you've got a wife and children in Scotland. And he swears an oath. Oh, tut, tut, tut. He swears an oath that he hasn't. And he promises, if she'll set him free, that he'll marry her, and all will be well, right? So she does what they always do in situations like this. She goes and gets a key, she steals a key, and she gets 2 horses from the stable. They travel to Edinburgh, crossing rivers. One assumes the Tweed, the Blackadder, who knows? Certainly the Tweed they'll have crossed, because from top to toe all wet was she. When they get to Edinburgh, he gives her a choice. He says, be my paramour, or get back to where you came from, because actually I do have a wife and 5 children. I know,
Gasp.
I know, gasp horror. She says, I can't go back to Northumberland. I tell you what, she says, I'll be a cook in your kitchen, but please let me stay. He doesn't want her to stay. He says something like he doesn't want such as her to be his servant. Not quite sure what he means by that, whether she's too high born or she'd be rubbish at it, who knows. Also, in one version, she says, take your sword and kill me then. I'm dishonoured and I can't go back. Now, that's another interesting little insight, because she's dishonoured. Why is she dishonoured? Just because she's gone, or because there's actually been some sexual engagement on the way? Who knows? But certainly she feels dishonoured. Or is it because when she gets back home, she'll be looked upon as dishonoured, whether she is or not? I'll come back to that because I've got a lovely quote later on from Stanley Robertson's mum, who says something about that situation.
Well, you do get a lot of that in folk songs, only about young women sort of and running away from home, and it's the mother and father that she's dishonoured them because she ran away with a man. Basically, you get a lot of that, don't you? So
yeah, oh, absolutely,
yeah.
Very common motif. However, he then decides that he'll let her go back home. In some versions, he makes her walk home, right? Because he's got the horses, of course.
Of course.
Sometimes he hires an old horse, nothing new, nothing fancy. She gets an old horse, and sometimes an old man to accompany her. In another version, she's sitting by the wayside, and 2 knights come riding by, and they escort her home. They take her home. Because being knights, of course, they're honourable. Right, so back home, she then has to face the wrath of her father, who calls her, of course, a whore in the Scots.
Yeah.
I love this. In one of the versions, he says, how could you be a Scotsman's whore when you're only 15? The implication being, should she have waited a couple more years? I don't know.
And then it's all right to be a Scotsman's whore, yes, of course.
Exactly. It's a slightly odd formulation.
Yeah.
So now that's her father's response. Her mother's response, however, is very different. Her mother says, oh, don't worry, Hinny. You're not the first woman that's been beguiled by a Scotsman. Hello, hello, hello. Mum, have you been there before? And she tells her she's still the fair flower of Northumberland. So that's vaguely in outline, with little bits of kind of insight. That's vaguely it. I mean, at this point, Matthew, I don't know if you'd like me to insert this here, but the interesting thing is that the Northumbrian version doesn't end with this father and mother kind of saying various things about welcoming her or not in different ways. It ends, Scots never were true, nor never will be. And that's how it ends, very Northumbrian. So quite a different. In fact, that Northumbrian version, which is in the Northumbrian Minstrelsy, which of course I have to hand here, a very beautiful edition.
There we go. Very good.
Here we go. Here it is. Final verse. It's a bit kind of broadsidey, actually. I don't know what you think of this. You don't usually get this in classic child ballads. Now, all you fair maids be warned by me. That's fairly typical broadside, isn't it?
It's not the sort of thing you get in it. That's very much like like the sort of thing that a broadside printer or something might have tacked onto a song in order to get the song to be a bit more sellable.
Exactly.
And so,
exactly.
you don't expect that in a proper child ballad, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, you don't. I'll just give you the rest of that verse. Now, all you fair maids be warned by me. Now, the refrain line is different in the Northumbrian version. We'll perhaps look at that later on. Follow no Scotsman over the strand. Scots never were true, nor ever will be, to lord nor lady, nor fair England. Now, that's very telling, that.
Yes, I always find it interesting because this song appears to be, a Scottish song, yet it is quite sort of anti-Scottish, and then the version from England, sort of what's the word, doubles down.
Absolutely. It's interesting because Bronson makes a comment about that. He says, the libel on the Scottish race seems to have had a considerable popularity north of the border. 6 out of the 7 recorded tunes are Scottish. Scots singers contrived to give it a twist that flattered their nation's sexual vanity. So, yes, very different, the Scots versions. It's all about, we're, English lasses can't resist us, whereas the English version lays it on the line that you cannot trust them. Oh, that's the wrong accent. But anyway, you know what I mean.
We know what you mean. So then,
Yeah.
is this song? I mean, we've basically said already that it is kind of Scots in sort of and that's the thing. So we know this song is found in Scotland and Northumberland. We'll come to one particular thing that I mentioned earlier in a second. But did this song spread anywhere else, or has this just stayed sort of relatively local?
Very localized. I mean, I wonder if it's because, as you know, Bronson and Child, they only had 7 versions that they printed from various sources, reprinted rather from various sources, and Bronson absolutely is clear that it wasn't very widespread at all. I wonder if it's because of the remoteness of that area in which it was clearly sung, and quite popular there, but didn't have, I don't know, resonance for people beyond that area. I mean, what we're talking about as well is the context in which the ballad is set, the geographical and social context in which it's set, which is very much the borders, the debatable lands, the lands that were fought over by the clans who lived there, and were very anarchic, very dangerous, very violent, but very localized, that whole area, giving rise to, as we know, a fantastic body of songs called the Border Ballads.
Indeed so. I mean, I know we get, when you look at all the oral tradition and you get songs that have mention particular places, and then you get other versions from elsewhere in the world that mention different places, and that's usually because the person who sings it has changed it to make it relevant for them. But with this one, the setting is, I think, it's more specific than just referring to the name of a lake or something. This is actually, it's all very intrinsically bound between Northumberland and Scotland, and Scotland. So I guess it would be harder to
localize,
Yeah,
relocate.
the harder to relocalize, I guess, is the word.
That's it, relocate it. I think you're right. That was certainly my sense of it when I was reading, and kind of knew anyway that it hadn't been very widespread, and certainly it didn't go over to America as far as I knew. But you tell me differently.
Well, yeah, because I was looking at the Roud Index, and there's 53 entries in the index, but actually, it turns out one of them is a broadside index version. But the 52 Roud index entries, 34 of them were in Scotland and 7 of them in England, and those 7 from England are all in Northumberland. So, there's there. But then, yeah, as I've always said to listeners, um, just because there's 52 entries doesn't mean that's 52 different versions, because that will be however, because each of the different tunes for it in Bronson will have a separate entry. So
Yeah,
if there's 17 tunes, that's 17 entries in the Roud Index.
yeah,
But nevertheless, it's a decent handful from Scotland, and basically a handful from England. But
yeah,
there is the one entry in the broadside index um, is from a songster printed in New York in 1860, and that's the
yeah.
one I mentioned called Fair Eleanor. And I haven't had time to delve into it to see if I can actually find a copy of that. It's not something online anywhere, but it's the Blackbird Songster from the Half Dime Songbooks #3, printed in 1860 by a broadside printer in New York called P.J.
Yeah.
Cozans in
Right,
1860. So it seems to
right.
have. In the index it says repository, as in where it lives, and
Yeah.
Steve Roud collection. So there you go.
Oh, right.
I'll ask Steve Roud. He might be good enough
Abs-
to send me a copy of it or a PDF of it
Absolutely. I
to
mean,
scan.
I'd be really interested to hear um, what the actual text is like, whether it has been Americanized or whether they've retained the Scots kind of pronunciation of words, or you know.
Yeah, I mean, we have the first line in the index entry, and the first line is not what we normally get. It's my father, he was a noble lord. So
Now, wait a minute. My father, he was a noble lord. Is that not what you often find at the beginning of the Outlandish Night? No, it's the famous
famous
flower
flower of serving men.
serving men.
It
Yeah,
is, yeah. I wonder if there's a link there. But then, as Steve Rowder said, the index is not without fault, and occasionally there are just genuine mistakes. And
yeah.
that
Okay.
song, there's every possibility that this song, Fair Eleanor, with My Father Was Noble Lord, is actually Round number whatever famous flower of
Yeah,
seven men is. But
yeah,
in the when uploading it to the index, it got
yeah,
mislabeled. And so
yeah.
Steve's very happy for anyone to email him and say, is this actually correct or is this a mistake? And so it's a constant, as we now know at the moment, a 54-year work in progress. And so it's not without fault. So there's a possibility, but that might not actually be this song. But as far as the index tells us at the moment, it's the same song, and it would be very interesting to find out. And I will make a point of emailing Steve Roud and asking him, because that would be
Thank you.
very
And
interesting.
would you mention the famous flower to him?
Yes.
And suggest that interestingly for me anyway, I had resonances of the famous flower and of the outlandish night buzzing around in my head while I was looking at all this material about the fair flower. And it has to be said, there are similarities, except, and this is purely personal, the young woman in the Fair Flower of Northumberland irritated me to hell, whereas the woman in the Outlandish Night, I take my hat off in the way that she didn't take her clothes off. I really take my hat off to her. You know,
Yeah.
she was such a strong and clever and witty woman, whereas there's very little wit in the Fair Flower of Northumberland. And I'm sorry to be critical of a child ballad, but there's not a lot of wit in it for my money.
No, that's fine. We're it's good to be critical. It's not something I expected when I started doing this podcast, because we're just talking about the songs, and I expected everyone to say it's a great song and this one's really good and all this stuff. And then when we came to the song "The Cruel Mother" in season 1, and Faye Hield came on, I asked Faye Hield to come on and talk about it because she sings it. And basically, her main pitch was, "I don't like this song at all." And actually, I thought it was an unexpected angle. I wasn't expecting that, but actually, it was actually surprisingly good to have
Oh,
that kind of opinion about a song talked about at length. So no, we're all for critical thinking here on
yes.
this
I
podcast.
mean,
Can't just be us praising everything and saying how wonderful these songs are, because sometimes
no,
these songs are pretty
absolutely.
terrible, you know.
They are, and also I think as singers, as performers, we have to have an attitude towards them. We have to identify. I mean, a lot of the old singers, Joe Heaney, I mean, was absolutely lyrical and profound about this. You know that you have to identify with the people in the song, in the ballads, and in the
Yeah.
songs. And I find it a bit hard. The person I do identify with, and the only bit of wit, is in the versions where the mum says, "Oh, don't worry, Hinny, you're fine. We've all been there," and I
Yeah.
quite like that. You know, it's very human, and slightly witty as well, especially when the dad has gone for her in
Mm.
such a brutal way. Thinking about that brutal thing, could I just read this thing from Stanley Robertson's mum? A
Yeah.
wonderful comment that he makes, because Stanley Robertson learnt his version, which I think is the tune that everybody, all the early second revival singers, learnt. I think it's his version, which he learnt from his mother. He talks about, he says he likes it, and but he doesn't sing it very often. His mother, he says, loved the border ballads, and she sang a lot of them. And this is what she said to him about the Fair Flower of Northumberland. She says, "Oh, now, goodness me, I've got to say this either in Scots. I think I'll translate." She says, "If a lassie makes a mistake, they never let her forget it. The only thing she ever gets told is, 'Oh, you're an easy mark. Your love was easily won.' And everyone's telling her she's not getting off from any getting off with it, getting away with it. That's what it says. From any with anybody, poor lassie, because she was. This is sweet. She was only a quiney. Isn't a quiney somebody very young? Isn't
I,
that what a quiney
I
means?
think so. Yeah, not a word I'm
Yeah.
familiar with particularly.
I think it is. And she says, and everybody's calling her out as the Scottish whore under the sun, all the Scottish whores under the sun. What a shame, she says. Now, I mean, I think that's, for me, as a singer and somebody who hopefully thinks about what she sings, that's immensely important. If you're interpreting a ballad, that piece of information and that insight, poor lass, she goes through this. She believes this bloke. She's betrayed by him in the worst possible way. She's then ill-treated in the sense that she only gets back because he gives her an old horse or a couple of kindly knights escort her home. She then gets slagged off to pieces by her old man, and it's only her mum, who's been there before, who has any sympathy for her. And to have that insight into that sympathy and generalized sympathy for women who go wrong or who get badly treated is wonderful. I find that immensely kind of insightful and useful as a performer if I were to ever sing this ballad, which I haven't done.
Absolutely. It's
Does that make any sense, Matthew?
it does very much indeed. That's absolutely fantastic stuff. Um, Yeah, so going back to the sort of placement, so basically it has kind of, aside from that one printing in New York, which we're sort of
Yeah,
questioning slightly until I
yeah,
talk to our Lord and Savior, Mr. Roud, on the podcast. Then we're basically talking about this song being only found in Scotland and Northumberland,
yeah,
basically. So
absolutely,
so that's,
absolutely.
it's in some ways it's actually rather nice that this song has sort of stayed locally. It's quite nice that it's been a bit self-contained and stayed there. So
Yes,
apart
absolutely.
from that one America printing, it probably isn't international. So in terms of the lineage, then how far back can we trace this song? Is there a particular year we've got as like an earliest printing?
There is, and this is lovely. I love this bit of the research. Um, Apparently, the first publication of the words were in where is he gone? Were in Thomas Delaney's novel.
Oh yes, I found that as well actually. Yeah.
And this is what Bert Lloyd wrote about it, but there are other people as well I'd like to quote, and also give a bit of background for Thomas Deloney, who was a very interesting character. Anyway, Bert said in 1597, there we go. In 1597, Thomas Deloney, the ballading silk weaver and forefather of the novel, published his rambling, pleasant history of Jack of Newbury, a tale half prose, half verse, concerning a famous Berkshire clothmaker, John Winchcombe, whose house was for a while a huge factory. This is interesting because Thomas Deloney himself was a weaver. So he's writing an imaginary half documentary history of the famous Berkshire clothmaker John Winchcombe. In the novel, now this is very, I find this quite funny. Delaney imagines Henry VIII visiting the factory. Hello, really? Takes a degree of imagination, it would seem to me, visiting the factory with its 200 looms and hearing the girls singing the Fair Flower of Northumberland as they worked. Two of them singing the ditty, I assume he means the narrative lines, and all the rest bearing the burden, by which he means the refrain lines. So that's quite interesting that he sets the ballad within a novel. Now, he was a ballad maker.
Ah, okay.
He was a broadside ballad maker. He put broadside. Now, what I haven't looked up, and it would be interesting to find this out, who published his ballads? He was probably in London, although people say that he was born, it is said that he was born in Norwich, but that's not absolutely biblical truth because they don't even know which year he was born. Anywhere between 1540 and 1560 is given as, a time when he may have been born. Fairly certain that he died in 1600. But he was a silk weaver. Why some people think he was born in London is that, of course, a lot of Flemish weavers came over around that period and brought the skills and craft of silk weaving with them, didn't they? So, it's very likely that he was from London, in which case were the London broadside presses printing his songs, which also begs the question: where what was the original version that he used in his novel? Was it another version that was in common currency? Had he written a version himself? Certainly the implication, I think, from Bert and others is that he tampered with the text of the ballad in the novel.
As so many people did.
As so many people did, exactly,
Yeah.
Matthew. So it's quite interesting. But however, to answer that question very simply, yes, it was first printed in 1597 in a novel stroke long poem, verse poem,
That's
by
fantastic.
Thomas Deloney. Very interesting. He was a political pamphleteer as well, you know,
Oh, okay.
and was briefly imprisoned because he wrote a letter signed by a group of yeoman weavers petitioning for stricter enforcement of the rules of the London Weavers' Company. Anyway, so a bit of a rebel. He's sounding very much like my kind of guy. I like the sound of this man enormously.
Absolutely.
Great
Yeah.
character. So there was that. That's your question, Matthew. I don't know if that's useful or
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting to see, how far back we can go, because that might actually be one of the earliest songs that we've had so far
oh,
on the
really?
podcast. I'm trying to think if there's any, because when was Pills to Purge Melancholy done? Because
Oh,
there's been a handful of songs so far we've covered that have turned up in
yeah,
there.
in pills.
The Frog and the Mouse, 1620s maybe later, or is it
Yes,
later than
I
that?
think so. And The Frog and the Mouse, I think, is generally thought to be the first published ever ballad, isn't it? A
Possibly. I
ballad.
mean, it's in there. It's in Pills to Purge, as is
Yeah,
Green Broom. That's in there as
yeah,
well, and
yeah.
and that one we just had that one on the Patreon with Rachel McShane, and also in there, which came up on the Patreon recently. We had Vic Gammon on again, and he gave us the history of the song "Old MacDonald Had a Farm," and the
Oh,
earliest
yes.
version of anything that even remotely resembles that is the song "A Charming Country Life" in Pills to Purge Melancholy. So it's a key. Pills to all 6 volumes of Pills. It's the key text
Oh,
in terms
yes.
of
Oh,
some of the
yes.
earliest known versions. But
Yeah,
that's from the 16 what's it, and then so it stands to reason that some of them do predate that, but we don't know
yeah.
when, how and where they predate that.
Absolutely.
But it's but consequently 1597 being a very specific year that
Yeah,
predates Pills. Not that this
yeah.
song isn't in Pills, but nevertheless it predates that. Might mean that
Yeah.
this is the earliest song we've covered. I'm trying to
Oh,
think if we've had any earlier ones
that's
where
very
we have a
exciting.
specific year.
Yeah.
There have been songs where we've said so that probably means there was a version from the
Yeah.
1500s, but with
Yeah.
a specific year, it's that might be our earliest.
Oh, that's very
There we go.
exciting.
There we go.
Rather
Uh,
delighted by
and so
that.
following that,
Yeah.
what's been the development of the song? Has it? I know from you reading out, sort of doing a précis of the plot and everything, and then from my knowledge of hearing people in the revival sing it now,
Yeah.
that it's in some respect it's more or less the same song and it hasn't changed much. But have there been any changes or little or changes in details or major plot
Um,
points?
the structure has changed, has not changed. It's always had that, what do they call it? Refrain structure. That is, you get a line of narrative and then you get a refrain, line of narrative and another refrain, a different refrain. One way that it has changed is that it would seem that with later versions, the refrains were, if you like, bled into by the narrative. So instead of the refrain staying absolutely the same, like for instance, oh, but her love 'twas easy won, then it has changed and reflected sometimes in some versions the line that's gone before. Now this is quite rare apparently, and my sense of it is, oh, it happens in English versions as well, with the Bruce and Stokoe one, the Northumbrian one, where the refrain line is "Follow my love, come over the strand." That gets changed as well, according to the narrative line that's been sung before. So that has happened in its development, which is quite interesting, I think. Let me see, melodies.
Yeah.
They're quite varied, the melodies. Certainly the ones that Bronson give are quite varied. But the one that seems to have been picked up and recorded the most, certainly by revival singers, is very close to the version that Stanley Robertson sings that he got from his mother, which is a lovely one. Da 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 dee da 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 tumble. Oh, but her love 'twas easy won. La da da dee dum da dee da ba dee. And she was the fair flower of Northumberland. I mean, that's the one that seems to have captured the imagination
Yeah,
of young revival
that's
singers.
definitely the one I'm familiar with, and that is the
Yeah.
one we will hear later from Alasdair Roberts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that
Well,
one.
I would suggest, and I know you know I'm going to suggest this because I've suggested it earlier and you were going to do it. You know, that the recording made in 1967 by the Exiles with Gordon MacCulloch singing the ballad, really people should hear, because that is the version, the version I think that most people who then recorded it after 1967 were inspired by. Even the great Dick Gaughan, you know, I don't think he recorded it till the 1980s, but he most definitely says he learnt it from Gordon MacCulloch, and it's lovely. One of the things that is absolutely unchanged, if we're looking again at how it has developed or not, is that constant lilting 6/6/8 triple time anyway 6/8 3/4 type tune has been maintained all the way through, and although some versions have a slightly different final cadence, one or two of them end on the supertonic, the note above the tonic, which is quite interesting. I tell you what, sorry, you were going to say. I
No,
can
I was
see
just
you were
gonna.
going to say something.
While you were talking, I was just loading up my PDF copy of Bronson to have a scan through some of the other melodies.
Yeah.
It's something I always
Yes.
forget to do, and I've had a couple of people, you know who you are, have mentioned to me that we should look more. We should keep looking at the melodies as well as the text. And
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at some.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes on these episodes, usually when Steve Gardam's on and we come to Pills to Purge Melancholy, I then attempt a relatively not entirely successful sight singing of some of the other melodies for it. I'm just looking at some of them now.
I know. Yes,
Because we've
I've
got
got them here. I've got them
da
here.
da 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 yeah da 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 yeah da 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 yeah da 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 da
There
da.
you go on the supertonic. Yeah, nice.
That's number two. That's the second tune in Bronson.
Yes,
So
I was just
that ends on an unresolved note, which is very
yes,
nice.
an unresolved ending. I love them.
It's very
Um,
good.
the Northumbrian one is really nice and keeps that triple time one. Dee da da dee dum ba da dum. Oh, it was a night in Scotland born. For my love, come over the strand, was taken prisoner and left forlorn, even by the good Earl of Northumberland. Now, do you know what? I cannot find anybody that has recorded that, and
No,
I
no.
cannot believe it. A Northumbrian version, and not any of our Northumbrian singers, even, oh, I say even, but also Rachel Unthank didn't know that existed, and when she recorded it, she recorded the Scots version.
Yeah, the Scots one is the one that people go for, isn't it? Because that's the
Absolutely.
one that's known. But
I know.
here we are shedding light on the other ones, so that's
We
good.
are. Incidentally, just briefly back to the
Yeah,
Northumbrian version,
yeah.
all I could find was Jack Armstrong, historically one of our really important Northumbrian pipers up here, recorded the tune, and it's on YouTube. So you can hear it played by the Northumbrian pipes. But for the life of me, I can't find anybody recorded it.
No.
And I whizzed off an email to the great and wonderful Alasdair Anderson, because he knows everything. And I haven't heard back from him because I thought
Oh,
he might know that.
Well, there
But
we
there you
go.
go. So yeah, loads of great tunes. Great tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. But they all tend to be that kind of that sort of 6/8 time
Yeah,
signature,
yeah,
major key, but sort of
yeah,
lilting
absolutely.
sort of
They're all
thing.
major from what I can make out. And I think Bronson says that as well, major tonality for all of them. But yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and then the refrains as well. I've got some. The very helpful as always is the website mainly Norfolk for comparing the words of some versions
Yes,
and things.
yes,
I'm just looking at
yeah,
those refrain lines, particularly the second refrain line, the first refrain line, which is the second line of each verse.
yeah, yeah.
And usually it is "Oh, but her love, it was easy one" or that sort of thing. I noticed, yeah, Ewan McCall
Oh,
with
yes, you recorded it too.
Provost
Yeah.
daughter was walking a lane. A young lassie's love whiles is easy won.
Yes, well, you see, I think singers have had a little imaginative work going on with that
Yeah,
line, because that version that most of the revival singers have sung is Kinloch's version,
yeah.
that he published in 1827, as you know. And the refrain line for that is, "A May's love whiles is easy one." Now, apart from how obscure that might be to many people, it's not easy to sing. "A maze loves wiles is easy one." It doesn't trip
Mhm.
off the tongue. In
Yeah,
fact, it makes your teeth fall out. So I'm not surprised that people have changed that line.
that's right. And there's a version from a singer I'm not familiar with, a guy called Jim Reed. Not a
Yes.
name I'm familiar with, but he had a version. A maid went by the prison door. Maids with wiles is easy one.
Yes, yeah.
So that's a slightly sort of truncated version
I,
of that longer
I,
one.
yeah.
But you know,
I
it's
I
there.
think that's a singer going, "I'll make of this what I will," and making it make sense for them, using as many of the original words as possible.
Indeed so. Right, is there anything before we come on to the usual recommendation section of field recordings? Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of bring up or discuss to do with this, or have we, in effect, exhausted the subject matter?
Oh, I don't think we have by any means, but
Well,
I
no, I
think
didn't.
we
Yes,
have touched on all the main things that we wanted to talk about. Um, so no, I'm quite happy to pop on to
lovely.
um, recommended listening.
Recommending listening. So there isn't actually that much on in terms of
No,
field
no,
recordings or official studio bound recordings of what we would call in quotes traditional singers.
or source singers. Yes,
Source singers.
absolutely.
We have only
Yeah,
really got three, and we'll sort of do
yeah.
them. So yeah, over to you. Who have we got? Oh, you've mentioned one of them already, actually.
Yes, Stanley Robertson, of course,
Of course.
traveller, writer, poet, storyteller, um, um, tutor.
Nephew of Jeannie Robertson,
Indeed,
the gypsy
indeed.
singer.
Yes.
Yeah,
Now that's really interesting for me. I'll try and explain why. If you hear him singing it, and I hope you all will, he 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 encapsulates for me that lovely lilting 6/8 3/4 triple time anyway tune, and he makes it lilt along, and it's delightful, it's light. You know, in the end, nobody dies in this ballad, which is hugely disappointing. I mean, I've got several candidates.
well, indeed so. Yes, off with his head.
Yeah, so there you go, nobody dies. So it's ultimately, it's kind of easy listening ballads, if there's ever such a thing, which on the whole there aren't. So, but I love his lilting approach to the singing of the Fair Flower. Now, as you say, Jeannie Robertson's nephew, her daughter Lizzie Higgins, who should also be listened to, singing
Of
this,
course.
has a completely vocal approach, a different vocal approach to the ballad. It's quite extraordinary. And in it, you can hear how closely she mirrors Jeannie's style of singing, which had that very measured, considered, slow, fairly heavy approach. Although it has to be said, Liz's vocal uh, um, uh, um, timbre is very different to Jeannie's, obviously. But she takes the ballad much more slowly, much more heavily. And it's so interesting that from the same family you should get two very different approaches. So they are my two candidates that I feel people really should listen to if they want to hear how this rather lovely and certainly really interesting song. I mean, honestly, if we had days, Matthew, I'd love to pick it to pieces, all of it.
Yeah.
There's so much in there that needs examining and talking about. I mean, within the text,
Yeah. It's just interesting then that there isn't a recording of Jeannie Robertson singing it.
No.
You know.
So it might have been Stanley that Lizzie got her version from. It's the same version.
Could well be, yeah.
Virtually same version. And yet she treats it quite differently.
But I think, Stanley's the bulk of Stanley's repertoire, I think, was songs from the family.
Yeah.
And so it stands to reason that I think Jeannie Robertson probably did know it. But
yes. Good point. Sorry, Matthew. Finish what you were saying. I beg your pardon.
Well, that was it, really. It's just it stands to reason that she knew it. It's a shame there isn't a recording of her, because that would be very interesting to hear.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it just? But the thought occurs to me. I think I mentioned that Stanley says he learnt it from his mother. So it might have come from another branch of the family.
Of course. Yeah, because there's a recording of Stanley Robertson singing it. It's on a CD, a double CD called The College Boy, which was released by the University of Aberdeen, the Elphinstone Institute there. Yeah. And that's called The College Boy, and it was subtitled Family Gems and Jewels from the Traveller Tradition.
There you go.
It's 35 of his best ballads and songs, apparently. So that's well worth checking out, and I'll definitely be adding that to my, if I don't already have it, certainly on my to-buy list. And then the Lizzie Higgins one, a bit harder to track down because there's an LP that came out in 1985 of Lizzie Higgins called What a Voice, Pipe Tunes, Folk Songs and Balladry. Yeah. And that's 2 sides and it's 12 tracks. And it's not on there. But there was at some point in later years, there's a digital download re-release that included about 8 more songs, the first one is "Flower of Northumberland."
Yeah.
So I'm sure we can track that down somehow. That you can get the digital download version of the Lizzie Higgins LP. Then that's where "Flower of Northumberland" is. Yeah. And the other one to just bring up, although neither of us have actually heard it, so we can't talk about it in any way, but we can at least say it's there and it's worth checking out because I'm a big fan of this guy singing as another Scots singer called Jock Duncan.
Yeah.
Who's a great singer. And there's a CD on Sleepy Town Records, which is not what I'm familiar with. But that's a whole album of his songs and singing. And it's on there as well, The Flower of Northumberland. So I'm not sure. I haven't delved into that one. If I bought the CD, I would have the booklet, which would have track research and notes in it, and it might tell us where some of the provenance of that one maybe.
Yeah.
Or it might not, but we don't know without buying it, which I may well do. But those are the 3 that we know that exist of actual traditional singers: Stanley Robertson, Lizzie Higgins, and Jock Duncan. And I will play clips. I'm definitely going to play Stanley Robertson and Lizzie Higgins in the mid-episode break. I'll play clips of those 2, and I'll put links to all 3 of those, the information about those in the show notes as always. Right then, I think we'll draw it to a close there. I think this is it's been lovely to have you on, and your time and expertise in these matters is very much appreciated.
You're very welcome, Matthew. I've really enjoyed it. It was a lovely little alcove, little oasis to delve into in the midst of all the other things I'm doing. So thank you for that.
Well, yes, and we'll definitely have you back at some point for more nerdery song research nerdery, because celebrating all this sort of stuff, it's marvelous.
All things nerdy.
But for the meantime, though, Sandra Kerr, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
A huge thanks again to Sandra Kerr for providing us with the history of the fair flower of Northumberland. After recording that chat with Sandra, I then emailed Steve Roud to inquire about that rogue American entry for this song labelled Roud 25, and Steve confirmed our suspicions that it's just a mislabelling and is in fact a version of Roud 199, which is Child Ballad 106, the famous flower of serving men. Obviously just a confusion with the word flower there. You'll have to wait until season 20 to hear about that song, though, here on In the Roud. As ever, at this, the halfway point in the episode, we're going to listen to a few different versions of this song sung by traditional singers. But as Sandra and I discussed earlier, there aren't that many. In fact, there's only 3 that we could really find, and I wasn't able to track down the recording of Jock Duncan. So we're just going to hear 2 clips now, Lizzie Higgins and then Stanley Robertson.
Da proveste dochter, who is walking her lane, oh, better love, it was easily won, when she saw Scott's prisoner, mocking his men, and she was a fool on Northumberland. Oh, Ganalasi would marry me. Our love, it was easily won. I mock her already, oh, high degree. If she'd me uto, my presence is strong.
Oh, the provost and daughter was walking her lane. Oh, but her love was easily won, when she heard a Scotch prisoner a mocking his mane, and she was the flower o' Northumberland. Oh, gin a lassie would set me free, oh, but her love was easily won, I would mock her a lady o' high degree, if she'd louse me out o' my prison sae strong. And she's going up to her father's bedstock, oh, but her love was easily won, and she's ta'en a key for to open the lock, to louse him out o' his prison sae strong.
And you can find the links to those tracks and the albums they're from in the show notes. Actually, as well as that, I will put a link to the YouTube page where you can hear the entirety of the Lizzie Higgins recording. The speed she sang it at, you heard there, means that the whole thing lasts just short of 11 minutes. And as I was putting this episode together, I did just sit there with my eyes closed and listen to the whole 11 minutes, and it was a completely sort of startlingly glorious 10 minutes, and I hope you all choose to do the same. Press play and sit there with your eyes closed and bask in the gloriousness of Lizzie Higgins. On to the second half of the episode. I sat down for a chat about his history with folk music and this song with renowned Scottish singer Alasdair Roberts. Well, hello, Alasdair Roberts.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Oh, I'm doing quite well, thank you. It's a strange old time at the moment, and things get to you, but in general, I'm doing all right.
Good.
Which is good. Not that it matters in terms of listeners, because we're about 6 weeks in advance, but what's the weather like where you are?
Well, we've just had a fairly large storm here in Scotland.
Oh, have you just had some of Storm Eowyn hit, have you?
Yeah, but now it's a clear blue sky and sunny outside.
Oh.
The storm's passed.
Lovely. Yeah, we in Sheffield here, we had it for about 6 hours. I think it seemed like to sort of not last very long at all. Maybe it was about 12 hours.
Okay.
But it's currently very foggy and misty here.
Okay.
Here ends the weather report 6 weeks earlier. Don't need to do that anymore. Yeah, well, it's great to have you on. It's I kind of knew that you sang this song anyway, and you were, I think, you were top of my list, I think, of people to contact about this song.
No, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great, and indebted to a guest on the last season of the podcast, Emily Portman, for giving me your phone number. So, otherwise, I'm not sure how I would have got in touch with you. But and then I've almost got a full house on the podcast of the Furrow Collective, because you now, and we had Emily Portman last season, and spoiler or a sneak peek for listeners, in about 3 weeks' time, I think, or maybe it's 2 weeks' time, we've got Rachel Newton on.
Yeah.
So, Lucy, if you're listening, well, I'll have you on at some point. But before we come on to the song, tell us a bit about yourself and your sort of musical upbringing and your sort of relationship with folk music. I mean, did you find folk music, or did folk music find you, or did you grow up with it? A lot of people grew up with it, but then some people just happened upon it one day, and sometimes they were introduced to it by someone else. What's the story, Alasdair Roberts?
I kind of grew up with it, but not in a very wholehearted way, I think. You know, my father was a musician. He had been a professional musician in the 70s. I was born in the late 70s. And him and my mother, well, my father's name was Alan, and my mother's name is Annegret. She's German. My father was Scottish. He died in 2001. But in the 70s, they ran a booking agency in Germany where I was born, and they booked a lot of sort of mostly Scottish and Irish folk bands and musicians to tour in Germany, play festivals in Germany and so on. And yeah, my father toured as well quite a bit. He toured in a duo with Dougie MacLean, made a couple of records with Dougie, one with Dougie and Alex Campbell.
I met Dougie for the first time last year at Whitby Folk Week.
Okay.
He's a very nice guy.
So yeah, Dougie was, Dougie and my father had a duo mostly in the 70s. And then my family moved back to Scotland, and that's kind of basically when my father stopped his professional involvement with music, around about 1980 or so. But he would still play in the house, play and sing in the house, usually guitar, banjo, played a bit of accordion as well, mostly those instruments. He would just, he was working during the week in a non-musical job, but he would play on the weekends, and sometimes he and I, when I got older, in my teens, we would play a bit together as well. And in my late teens, I started getting more interested in, folk music, traditional songs, and so on. So I was growing up, and when I was in my teens, I had this record collection to explore. He had a lot of good LPs, but I only really started appreciating them more when I was maybe from the age of about 16 or 17, and then kind of started singing this songs myself when I was maybe in my very late teens, early 20s. I was writing songs before then. I started writing my own songs when I was, I guess seriously when I was about 15. But I wasn't singing traditional songs. I was writing songs before I was singing traditional songs, and now I still do both. Still do both things, and there's some overlap. Nice. Yeah.
So yeah, and so your instrument is the guitar, isn't it? That's what
Yeah.
Mostly I know you for, anyways. Singing and playing guitar.
Yeah, that's my main instrument, the guitar, sure, and singing as well. And that's that's what I learned from my father. He was the first person to teach me a bit of guitar. I also had lessons from a guy called Laurie Hamilton, who sadly died a few years ago. And my father's style was more. I'd say the way I play now is more indebted in a way to how my father played. But Laurie was a great teacher too. As he had more of a jazz background, so he taught me a few more kind of like fruitier chords than I would have otherwise known, and a bit more theoretical knowledge. Whereas my father taught me kind of like fingerstyle and open tunings and things, which I still use. Yeah.
And over the years, from my perspective, I've known you. I mean, we haven't actually met until this very morning. We're recording this, as far as I'm aware. But obviously, we realised, or not realised, remembered that at least back in 2010, I think we were in the same room once together.
Yeah.
at the Royal Oak Folk Club in Lewis.
That's right. Yeah.
Run by Vic and Tina Smith, because myself and my dad and his duo partner Will Duke were, as the five of us were the resident musicians, doing the tune sets that started the evening, and then floor spots as well. And you seem to remember that I sang a song that night, but I remember being there that night, but I've not memory of any song I sang.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you sang a song. Yeah, I remember you standing and singing something. Yeah.
Well, it could only have been a handful of things, because that would have been halfway through uni, so I would have been 20 then, probably, ish. And yeah, I didn't know as many songs then as I do now. Naturally, but
well, one builds one's repertoire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yes. So I remember that, because that was you solo and guitar, but then my main awareness of you really has been through your work with the Furrow Collective, with Emily Portman, who I've known for a very long time, and Lucy Farrell, who was on the folk degree at Newcastle with me, or a couple of years above me, I think, and Rachel Newton, who I haven't met yet, but we will, because she'll be on the podcast quite soon. And you work with them, so do you want to just tell us a bit about the Furrow Collective as well? Because we didn't actually do any of that with Emily.
Yeah, well, that group's been together now for just over 10 years. It kind of came together because, well, I live in Glasgow. I've spent most of my adult life in Glasgow, but I had a gig in Newcastle in about 2006 or 7. Maybe a bit later than that, and Emily Portman was also on the bill with her band at the time. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was Rubus.
Yeah, that's right, Rubus.
Whether it was...
I mentioned that band on Emily's episode, and she said you've got a very good memory. So because I remember seeing them perform at the Newcastle University on one of the lunchtime concerts. And so yeah, Rubus.
Yeah, I can't remember if she was using the name Rubus then, or if it was the Emily Portman group or something. But so Emily and I met then, and then a year or two later, I asked her whether she wanted to sing on an album that I was making. And then a few more years after that, she said, "Do you want to come and try and make some music with Lucy and Rachel and me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So that's kind of how the group started.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's over 10 years and about quite a good handful of albums as well, isn't it now?
Yeah, I think 4 albums, an EP.
Very good. Mm. Nice. So then, right, so this song then, The Fair Flower Northumberland, Roud 25, Child 9. Do you remember when you first came across this song, your first hearing of this song?
strangely, I don't remember when I first heard it the very first time, but it was one of my father's songs. But, I learned it largely from a live recording of him, of Alan, which was made in Germany in the late 70s, I think 1979, in a town called Pforzheim. I have an LP, which was my father's, and it's a compilation of live recordings from this festival, and that's one of the songs on it. That's the only song of my father's on the record, actually.
Okay.
And he's playing, guitar and singing that ballad in what sounds like a very echoey space. So that's the version that I kind of based mine on. I don't know if I don't have any memory of him singing it in person. I must have heard him sing it in person at some point or other. I don't remember. Like I say, he died in 2001. I was only 23 or 24. I think I just turned 24 when he died, and I was just, starting to sort of nurture this interest in these kind of songs and ballads. So, for me, in a way, it's very sad that he died. So he was only 54 when he died, because I feel like I still had a lot to learn from him about
Right, yeah.
the songs and about music, and also just about the people that were involved in it, the people that he would have known in the 60s and 70s in Glasgow and elsewhere. There's probably lots of interesting stories that he took to the grave, and information about songs and knowledge and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's basically where I got the song from.
And you've been very kind enough to actually provide that recording for me. You sent it to me the other day, and so we'll actually, right now, let's take a brief listen to a verse or two of that.
The province order was walking the lane. I but her love it was easily won, and she's by the Scots prisoner back in the main. She was the Kerr of Northumberland. And a token the lassie would marry me. I but her love it was easily won. I would make her a lady of high degree if she grows in the hills of this prison stays strong. And she's gone to bend to her father's bedside. I but her love it was easily won. And she's stolen the keys to her father's loves, to lose and lose all this prison stays strong.
And there we go. That was Alasdair's father singing a bit of The Fair Flower of Northumberland.
Yeah, when he died, I gathered together lots of recordings of him. Most of them recordings that I had made on my 4-track, my cassette 4-track. This was sort of before digital recording was a thing. But also this live recording from the 70s, and I made a CD, maybe like 150 copies of this CD to give to family and friends. So that's when I digitized that recording that you just heard a bit of.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, it's a great recording. Thanks for providing us with that.
No problem.
It's lovely. So when in your sort of musical life did you decide to start, to learn it and then perform it yourself? When did this song sort of turn up in your repertoire?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange because I'd obviously known it for a long time before I started singing it. I don't really know why I started. Sometimes it's quite mysterious as to why you're attracted to a particular song as a singer at a given time. But I think it was probably about 2009 or so that I really started singing it and exploring it. And so I may well have sang it in Lewis that time when we were in the same room before, but I don't remember. But so yeah, I've been singing it in some form since about for at least 15 years. Yeah, and it's changed, and it's still changing when I sing it. Probably if I listened to a recording of myself from 2009 or 10 singing it, I'd be embarrassed and think it was terrible. Because it was very early days with the song then, and it does take a while to, to find a song and for it to make it your own and for it to sort of bed in,
Absolutely. Do you mean changed in terms of the sort of just in terms of the way and the confidence of the performance, or do you mean you've accidentally changed the words occasionally and that sort of thing?
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, to do with the strength of the performance, the kind of I don't know if proficiency is the right word, but yeah, the sort of skill with which one interprets the song, but not necessarily technical skill, but also just emotional understanding, emotional maturity to to convey certain songs. You need more maturity than I probably had 15 years ago, right, or whatever. As my understanding of people and humanity and human situations develops, or one likes to think that it develops, and that has a positive effect on your interpretation of songs.
Sure, yeah. And just the more you perform it, the better it gets. That's just the way you're learning new songs. That's the one thing I don't like about a lot of the way that we sort of do things on the folk scene is that you have to record the album before you tour it, because you have to sell the album on the tour. But I always find that I'm never very happy with the way I performed it on the album.
Yeah,
and then you do a tour of however many gigs, and you find that by the end of the tour you perform it so much better.
Yeah, I know, I can relate to that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's good for things to have the opportunity to sort of settle in before you record them. But you don't often get that opportunity. Yeah, but then you shouldn't. I just try not to think of the studio version or the album version as the definitive version, because the song is isn't a frozen thing. It can still develop, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how you felt about it at the time, and reflected in that recording.
That's right. Yeah,
and it can develop. Yeah.
I do try now to. Luckily, when you're a new band or a new thing, you do have to do quite a lot of gigs before you're able to, in the mindset, to do an album, because you've got to build up a bit of a thing first. But then, a band that one of my current things, we're kind of trying to work it so that we go into the studio to record the album the day after our tour finishes, just so that it's all so fresh and good, But it depends on trying to get studio dates to line up with the end of a tour is quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think the older and more experienced you get as a musician, then the easier it is to get into a song more readily or something, and you just get more skilled at interpretation, I think. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a song that you kind of sing primarily solo, isn't it? But I know it's on an album with some other people as well.
Yeah. I mean, when I started singing it was usually solo, and then solo? Was this always with guitar, or was this ever unaccompanied as well? Sometimes unaccompanied. Usually, when I started off, it was with guitar accompaniment, but actually, more usually nowadays, I'll sing it just unaccompanied. Maybe it's because I have more confidence in my ability as a singer for the voice alone to carry the song, and I think, it doesn't really need the guitar. In fact, maybe the guitar detracts from it or something. I don't know.
Well, also, unaccompanied singing is almost like the scariest form of, from a performer's perspective, kind of almost the scariest form of performing, because there's literally no safety net. You can't
Yeah.
hide behind an instrument. You have to do it, and you have, in a sense, you have to get it right. You have to, yeah. There's nothing between you and the audience. So
Yeah, that's true. I still remember the first time I ever chose to do a gig completely unaccompanied. I think it was would have been about 23 or 24 years ago, and it was quite terrifying. But I thought I've got to do this. You know, I've got to learn how to do this. You know, I probably won't really ever do gigs now that are completely unaccompanied, unless it's like some kind of event where that's stipulated because it's an event for like, you know, ballad enthusiasts who prefer unaccompanied singing. But yeah, it was terrifying to do that at first, but it's, you know, every year it becomes a little bit less terrifying.
yes, I only tend to do it if it's like I was booked at the back in 2017. I was booked for the Killarney traditional singing weekend, and that was fully unaccompanied, and which was glorious. But that's obviously a very specific thing. Yeah. And normally I would have a concertina or a melodeon or something, but then or a mandolin. But last year at Whitby Folk Week, I did a lot of emceeing and things, but also they put me down for 1 half-hour or 35-minute performance solo gig, and I didn't have time from collecting my ticket on the first day to going back to the car to get the instruments to go back to the venue. So I just went straight to the venue without instruments and did 35 minutes unaccompanied, and it was strangely liberating, actually, because I could just pick any song from my back catalogue as long as I could remember the words, and just do it. You know, didn't matter about anything. I didn't have to do a sound check either. It was fantastic. But it's even for more hardened or traditional folk clubs. A lot of them don't seem to be able to want 45 minutes of unaccompanied singing as much as I would love to go on tour and just do that.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing to persuade people. Because my main thing now is a vocal harmony trio, so that is unaccompanied singing, but it's 3-part harmony. Whereas solo unaccompanied singing is quite a hard sell, even for folk clubs sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. It can be quite intense to listen to. You know, there's not much respite. You know, from unless you find a sort of good way to utilise silence in the process in a kind of John Cage style way.
I guess you just have to make an even bigger effort to create variety in terms of the types of songs and the kinds of songs that you would sing, or
that's true,
or the mood of the song, what kind. The tempo of the songs and the different key signatures and stuff. You have to make more of a concerted effort with the things that you can have an effect on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, all those things you mentioned, and also just the different ways of singing, just different styles, different levels of force or emphasis that you might put into it. You know, That's interesting.
I mean, I sing quite a lot of really long ballads, and even in a solo gig where I do use instruments, I'll only put one of them in a night, you know, because here's a 20-minute Lord Bateman. I'm sure they all enjoyed it, but if I then said, here's a 15-minute Lord Randall, or here's a 12-minute long Plains of Waterloo, I might lose the audience quite quickly. But I can throw one in there, and the rest have to be in quotes normal length.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably like 2% of the people there who would want that, who would really appreciate that, and then the more general listeners, it would be a bit more indigestible for them.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, you don't want to underestimate your listenership. You don't want to underestimate your audience, So it is good to sort of break out these really long songs sometimes.
Exactly. I'm just trying to learn every long ballad that the Sussex singer Gordon Hall had, except that I can't. I can learn as many as I want, but I don't have as many opportunities to perform them. So my learning them is a slow process, purely because I don't get to perform them much, rather than how long it takes to learn them.
Yeah.
But never mind. We're not. He didn't have this one in his repertoire. So yeah, so is this one, in terms of solo at least, has this one been in your repertoire sort of pretty consistently?
Yeah, I'd say I've played it not every concert I've given in the past 15 years or so, but probably, the majority, maybe like 60 or 70% of concerts, I would have sung this song in some form or other. If it's a solo concert, it'd usually be with guitar accompaniment. I've played it in bands as well. I mean, I recorded it on the album What News with Amble Skews, an electronic musician, and David McGuinness playing piano, and we toured together, and we played a few concerts where we played our version, which was more or less as it was on the album. But then I've also toured with other musicians, like with my friends Stevie Jones and Alex Nielsen and fiddler Rafe Fitzpatrick, for example. We've toured as a quartet, and we've also played the song live. Or I've done it with guest singers singing the refrain. Or it's a good one because it's got the kind of refrain. It's a good one to invite the audience to join in with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it helps if one of those refrain lines is the title of the song.
Yeah.
Sort of drills it into them, and they'll go away remembering it.
Yeah, but one issue with this song is that the refrain isn't very regular. Maybe it's particularly the way that I sing it. I tend to change certain lines or words to change the emphasis a bit. It's definitely, especially in terms of the what do you call them? What's the grammatical term for that class of word again? The conjunctions and so on. Not conjunctions.
Yeah.
This is terrible. I mean, I studied English language. I'm not sure I should really remember that term, but well, I change what and but and vary those words depending on the context of what's happening. Oh, but her love. Oh, and but her love. Oh, but your love. So it keeps people on their toes because the conjunction and the other aspects change every time. And
I've just realised that actually it's not the same every time. My brain went to because it's more often than not the fourth line of each verse is, and she's the fair flower of Northumberland, or you're the fair flower of Northumberland, and so, but it's not that all the time, but it is quite a lot of the time. Is each verse ends with the title of the song, which is quite handy.
Yeah, but I don't mind if people do. Obviously, I don't mind if people don't sing exactly the same thing that I'm singing, because I quite enjoy a bit of heterophony and a bit of verbal complexity and confusion. So it's okay.
So yeah, it's an odd song in a way. All songs are odd, I think, actually, but. This is I just looking up what other people said about it on God bless mainly Norfolk as a website for collating everyone's sleeve notes together. And I remember, but actually I don't think it was in the sleeve notes. I was Sarah Gray. I'll mention Sarah Gray later on, but she did record it once, and she just mentioned what Bronson said about it in because Bertrand Bronson did the tunes for the Char ballads, and he called it libel on the Scottish race, because yes, the Scots person isn't the nicest person.
No, yeah, exactly. He's not, is he? And neither is the father. When she comes back.
That's right. The fathers in ballads are not they're not the nicest people. They're very, very quick to disown their children out of honour.
Yeah.
In a way, which, in one way, it's sort of it was a different time back then, I suppose, and that's the thing. Yeah. But at the same time, in a modern context, looking at this is just horrendous. What father would do that now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
well, I didn't. Yeah, it's strange. Because I don't really think of Bronson as necessarily commenting very often on the lyrical, or the subject matter of ballads. Is usually more about the tunes and the melodies and so on. In fact, I don't even know if I've looked up Bronson's, words and thoughts on that ballad. Oh yeah, this libel on the Scottish race seems to have had a considerable popularity north of the border. Yeah. Scots singers contrived to give it a twist that flattered their nation's sexual vanity, but the compliment still keeps an ugly side. Yeah, I mean, most of the people I've heard sing the song have used, I guess, a variant of the same tune. I don't know whether you know any other tunes, but
no,
the one
pretty
that
much,
I used,
because I've got a couple of field recordings, and I've heard this quite a lot on the sort of revival folk scene in general. But it's always been with this melody, with the same melody. But I'm just looking at Bronson, and 7, I think he has 7 different melodies.
right?
I'll try and hum some of them. Hang on, because it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
No, I won't do that because sometimes my sight singing can be very good and sometimes it's dreadful. But we've got versions called the Heiress of Northumberland, the first one. That's interestingly, they all 7 tunes that Bronson has are all in 6/8 time signature, and I guess that's kind of dictated by the way the words scan, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. That must be a metrical thing.
And I'm pretty sure it's all in the major key as well. I don't think there's any minor ones.
Yeah, my sight reading's quite slow as well, but I should sit down and work all those different tunes out and see, how I feel about them. But yeah, I mean, I just obviously learnt it from my father's recording, so that's what I've always sort of sung.
Yes, I think a lot of people, just glancing from sleeve notes that are mainly Norfolk, a lot of people learned it from Gordon MacCulloch.
Right.
I think he was in the Exiles, wasn't he?
He was in the Exiles. Yeah.
That's right. And so, because, the Exiles did it on an album, and A.L. Lloyd and Gordon MacCulloch wrote the notes for it. And then a lot of people who have subsequently learnt it have mentioned Gordon MacCulloch. That's where Dick Gaughan got it from. And Sarah Gray learnt it from Dick Gaughan, so that's the line of that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure who my father would have learnt it from, possibly from the Dick Gaughan record. I don't know whether he knew Gordon MacCulloch. I mean, I never got to ask him that, but he was in Glasgow in the 60s, so my feeling is it was probably a song that was being sung quite a lot in Glasgow in the 60s, and that's kind of where he learnt it from. Maybe from Alex Campbell, although I don't know if Alex Campbell ever recorded that song himself. I'm sure he knew it, but I don't know if I've ever heard a recording of Alex Campbell singing it.
Right. I know that it does turn up in the book, Alasdair Clare's book, 100 Folk Songs and New Songs, because that's where it's also on the first album by what was then called Rachel Unthank and the Winterset, before they became known as the Unthanks.
Oh yeah.
And they got it from this book, 100 Folk Songs and New Songs by Alasdair Clare.
Okay.
But for a lot of people, the source is either someone where the line stems back to Gordon MacCulloch, or they just talk about the where Child got it from. Essentially, not where Child got it from, but the 1597 book, The Pleasant History of Jack Newbury.
Yeah, I mean, aside from what I put in the sleeve notes, I don't, my knowledge of the history of the song is quite limited. So,
Yeah. But that's fine. That's we do what we can when we can.
I feel like of those kind of details, I learn as much as I feel I need to know, and a lot of it is more about my personal relationship with the ballad, or with with the characters in the ballad, and
sure.
Trying to bring them to life in my interpretation of it.
Yes, and the characters in this one, there's only one that comes out of it quite well, or two, I guess, if you count our lead heroine.
Well,
she's just she's essentially a victim of. She's sort of not scammed, but she's what's the word? Beguiled by the the Scot of the song, you know.
Yeah, you know, she's okay. The old man who is hired to take her back home seems relatively harmless to me. You know,
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, what old man wouldn't accept some good money to do a good deed like that?
And then, of course, her mother at the end of the song.
Yeah.
As it takes the view that, but that it's okay, rather than her father who decides that she's a whore. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I like that her mother says, you're not the first one that the Scots beguiled, but it took me a long time to consider that might have been based on the mother's own personal experience.
Well, maybe she saw this as a bit of history repeating itself. For her, or just a life lesson for her daughter, the lead of the song, and just it's all part of your life experience.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I feel like that thought only really occurred to me within the past couple of years. Like, I'd never really given that much thought to the mother's own, experience with Scotsmen and their beguiling tongues. But it's very possible that she's alluding to some personal experience there. Some prior run-in with Scotsmen.
Maybe that's why the father, her husband, doesn't take too kindly to the experience had with the daughter. Maybe he knows about what happened to his wife earlier in the... I mean, this is all speculation, but it's quite interesting.
Of course, speculation, but these kind of speculations can can colour your interpretation of the song. I can sing that certain verses in certain ways to bring these psychological possibilities out.
Yeah,
I could,
absolutely,
depending on the way that I sing that line of her mother's, it could bring that complexion to it, that the mother's had this kind of experience in the past.
Exactly, yeah.
Or I can choose to to downplay that and not make that a feature of it.
Sure. And maybe that does then provide an insight into why her father's attitude is quite so vitriolic, I guess.
Yeah, it could be part of it. Although you'd imagine that if he knew for sure that there'd been some dalliance between his wife and a Scotsman in the past, then they would presumably no longer be married. But he might have his suspicions.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, maybe he has suspicions, but he can't confirm them. But then, his daughter's behaviour is compounding his suspicions about his wife or something. Maybe.
Yeah. But it's all interesting stuff to ponder upon. Also, I find it quite interesting that this is a slight change of subject from the whole fathers, mothers, daughters thing. That, as far as I have heard, I've only come across 2 songs, I guess Scots songs, that actually mention Northumberland. I just find that.
What's the other one?
Lord Bateman usually.
Oh yeah.
Could buy the half of Northumberland, or half of Northumberland belongs to me. It's not. Yeah. Northumberland doesn't come up in songs quite as much by name, quite as much as other counties might.
Yeah.
And in Scots songs, it tends to be Scots regions and locales.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, there's something about the
But I guess it has to be somewhere that's far enough away. Oh no, is she? Is the lead in the song? Is she from Northumberland, or she's not Scottish? She's from Northumberland because the knight or whatever is Scot. So So this song is actually essentially set in Northumberland.
Yeah, it's set in Northumberland, and the provost has imprisoned this Scotsman for some unknown reason, probably for some roguish misdeeds.
Yeah. So I'm getting confused then between the two. It's a Scots song, but it's set in Northumberland, and obviously that's why it mentions Northumberland, because it's set there rather than it just mentioning it in passing, as opposed to like Lord Bateman or Young Becky, where it's actually one of the characters owns half of Northumberland, but the song is actually set in like mostly Turkey and then back over here again.
Yeah,
we'll come to that song. That'll be the last song of season 4 on the podcast, coming up in the summer. But anyway, as a side thing, there's maybe not much to talk about in terms of Northumberland for this song. But it just...
Well, I mean, there's just, there's so many ballads and songs about the kind of, about that border region. And from that border region, I suppose it's not really strictly the borders, but it's, it's about a crossing of the border between Scotland and England. And in some sense, it's about, conflict between men and women, but also between Scots and English,
indeed, of course.
So there's two kind of conflict points there within the song. I don't really know how much we can trust the Scotsman when, he claims that he's able to make her a lady of high degree, and, I don't think he's probably not that, he's probably not the nobleman that he wants us to believe he is, or, the rich man, at least, that he wants us to believe he is.
Well, I don't know, I mean, maybe, but then there's some versions where he is actually a knight. I think in some of the earlier versions, I think he is actually a knight.
Right.
But then he basically is just using her so he can escape from prison.
Yeah, basically that's it. Yeah.
And then leaving her and sending her away. So going back to the sort of arranging thing, as we talk about unaccompanied performing, and you sing this with guitar a lot. What went into the arrangement that's on the album? What News with you and David and Amble?
Yeah, I mean the sort of beginning of that project was that I had a load of ballads, traditional ballads that I was interested in working with, but again going back to this thing I was saying about sometimes feeling that the guitar accompaniment was superfluous. And that I might as well just sing the songs unaccompanied. I thought, well, I could do that, or I could try and, see whether there's a way to find some new setting that doesn't involve guitar, but involves some instrumentation that, could be quite, unexpected and interesting, and, involving good musicians. So, in the first instance, I contacted David McGuinness, who I'd worked with a few times before, and said, I've got 9 or 10 ballads. Do you want to get together and try and play them and see what happens? So we just met. David works at the University of Glasgow in the music department, and they've got nice pianos there. So we met there a few times. This was about 2012, 13, and we started working on these ballads, and one of them was the Fairflower, Northumberland. And then at a certain point, a few months into this process, David had met Amble and seen her perform in Stirling doing some electronic work to do that was somehow involved with a traditional song, and he suggested involving Amble. So then the project grew into this trio collaboration. But it was recorded kind of in various stages. The first stage was David and I recorded the piano and vocals in the university, and with separation. I was in a different little room, and David was in the big hall where the pianos are, the recital room, and then we sent those recordings to Amble, and she made some electronic arrangements, to go with that song and the other songs, and kind of gradually over a year or two, the record kind of came together that way, through us kind of exchanging ideas online and sending files and suggestions and so on. And Amble did some singing on the final version as well. So that's that What News version. And we did, like I said, we toured and we played the whole record a few times, and but at the same time I'm still playing and singing the song with guitar accompaniment or just unaccompanied vocal live. I'm playing it in other contexts as well. And nowadays when I'm singing it, I've tried experimenting with changing the key. I think on the record with David and Amble, it's in the key of G. Usually when I played it live, it would be a little bit lower, but obviously G is easier for piano than F sharp. So, although not if you're as skillful a pianist as David, because he can play in pretty much any key existent existing or non-existent. But now I've been working with an old friend of mine, Donald Lindsay, who's a fine singer and also a piper, small piper mostly. Plays a variety of pipes, but his main focus these days is the Scottish small pipes. And we've just been doing some recording. Did some recording last month. No, this month. It's still January. But by the time this comes out, this will be coming out. You're listening to this in March. So back in January, Donald and I started making an album, and we recorded a new version of Fairflower Northumberland in the key of D. So quite a leap down from G for me. So
wow.
That's such a major change of key brings out changes in the voice, in the vocal approach that inflect the song in different ways. Exactly how, I don't know how I can articulate the various ways that it changes it, but it's partly just a process of getting older and one's voice deepening as one ages, but it's also to do with the range of the pipes, what worked best on the small pipes.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, that'll hopefully come out later this year, maybe in the autumn. Donald and my version, a new version of the ballad, which is very different again from the one with David and Amble, which is, in a way, that I think that record, What News, is quite, we worked on it a lot and spent a lot of time on it, and in a way it's quite a sort of slick production. It's quite sort of honed, whereas the recording with Donald was quite, it was quite a fast, very live recording process, kind of warts and all.
Nice.
It's quite a different approach to the song. Recording in the analogue domain as well, with Donald recording to tape at Green Door Studio in Glasgow, rather than recording digitally. A lot of different aspects to it, so it'll sound quite different, I think.
Wow.
And Donald singing on it as well.
Nice one. Great. Well, look forward to that later this year.
Thanks.
Right. Should we come on to some recommendations then of other versions of this?
Yeah.
More or less, they're all more or less the same version, but in terms of different performances and different people recording it. You had a short list of some. We've mentioned a couple of them already, I think, but let's mention them again.
Obviously for me, my father's version, Flower Northumberland, from the folk festival in Pforzheim in Germany in the late 70s, that was on that live record, is probably the most important, in terms of my own interpretation of the song. But that's, it's quite obscure. I don't think many people will have that record or be able to find it.
Sure, yeah.
It's just a compilation of live recordings from this one festival. Well, I think it's mostly German musicians, actually. Then there's a few Scottish and English and Irish musicians on there as well. I'll need to dig it out and see exactly what's on it, because there's probably some other interesting stuff on there.
Sure.
So yeah, the Alan Roberts version is would be my first pick.
Right.
But then for something that's more commercially available, shortly after my father died, a good friend sent me a copy of Dick Gaughan's first album, which I didn't know before then, and he said he observed, there's a song in common with that CD of your father's that you sent me, because I digitized that song, and so Dick Gaughan sings Flower Northumberland on his first album as well.
Oh yes, that's
so that'd be one of my top picks.
1972 album, No More Forever.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's on Trailer Records. It's one of the trailer ones.
Yeah. Bill Leader recording.
That's right.
Recorded in London, I believe. Ali Bain plays fiddle on at least one track.
Yeah.
Great record, great debut album. And Dick's version is, it's different from my father's version. It's a lot slower. I feel like it's a lot slower.
Right.
A lot more measured sort of tempo.
And he did say in his sleeve notes, I learnt this from Gordon McCulloch, so that all stems back to the Exiles again.
Yeah, it's on their album The Hail and the Hanged, I think. I've got that record. I've not listened to it for a while, so I can't quite bring their version to mind, but
And that's on Topic. That's a Topic album, 1967.
Yeah. So I guess they were Glasgow based, so my father was in Glasgow at that time, so maybe he heard Gordon McCulloch sing it in the Scotia Bar or something. I don't know.
Any others from you, or was that it?
I like Sheena Wellington's recording of it. Sheena's a great singer from Dundee. I'm not totally sure where she got hers, but it's it's basically the same tune and the same setting as all the other ones that I've kind of mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, the sleeve notes are on Many Norfolk. She said, I learnt this from the great singer Maureen Jelks of Dundee.
Oh yeah, Maureen Jelks. Yeah, she died a few years ago. Sadly, another great singer from Dundee.
Right.
I'm not sure where Maureen Jelks. I didn't actually know Maureen Jelks. I knew her singing, but I didn't know her personally.
Right.
But I don't know where she would have got the song from. Maybe it's through that East Coast connection with people like Lizzie Higgins and her mother, Jeannie Robertson.
Yeah. Great. I'll mention a few then. Keeping it in-house on the podcast. Last year, as it were, but last season as well on the podcast, we had Laurie Watson on doing the history of the Dowie Dens of Yarrow for us. And she made an album in 2009 called Laurie Watson and Rule of Three as the artist, and then the album's called Pleasure's Coin, and on there is Flower of Northumberland.
Okay, that's a new version for me to listen to. I've not heard Laurie Watson's version yet,
There we go.
So I look forward to that.
And that's got, Laurie Watson, the Rule of Three is Laurie Watson, Innes Watson, and John Somerville, and there's lots of guest people on it, including Chris Drever, Kareem Polwood, Aidan O'Rourke. There was a star-studded lineup there.
Yeah.
An American one. It's not an American one in the American performance, but it's still the same Scots, even with Scots dialect. The fantastic singer and banjo player Sarah Gray from America did it on her first ever album back in 1970. It's Sarah Gray with Ed Trinket. And
oh wow! So she did that even before Dick Gaughan did his version.
Yeah, I guess so.
She.
Because her sleeve notes. Oh, maybe there's a re-release of it. Okay, I'll try and say that again. It does say at the end of the notes, Sarah's version learned from Dick Gaughan.
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe she heard him sing it live or something.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah, but then presumably that would have been in the UK or in Europe rather than in North America. I don't know if they could have been touring America.
No, she's always toured over here, I think, as well as America. Yeah. So I think, she must have heard it over here.
Yeah, but there's a great Scottish singer who now lives in America. I wonder whether he has a version of it. A guy called Norman Kennedy. You probably know Norman Kennedy's singing.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Norman Kennedy sang this song too. He's living in Vermont now. He's a weaver, or he was working as a weaver.
Okay.
He runs a weaving school in Vermont. So I wondered whether it might have come through that connection, but obviously not.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Mm.
And then Jackie Oates, who has not been on the podcast yet, but we did have her back at the beginning of January on the Patreon, talking about wassailing and the Gloucestershire Wassail song. Her debut album, her first ever album, called Jackie Oates, came out in 2006. And it's on there. And it's on there, I think, because she was in the Winter Set that was originally Rachel Unthank and the Winter Set. She was in the band originally with Rachel and Becky Unthank and Belinda O'Hooley when it was that band.
That's right.
And then it transformed into the Unthanks, and Jackie went her own way.
Yeah.
And so the Fair Flower of Northumberland is on the Rachel Unthank and the Winter Set album, The Cruel Sister, from 2005. And the following year, it's then on Jackie's first album as well.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've listened to that. I'll need to go and listen to that
I
again.
certainly did have a CD of Cruel Sister at one point. I'm not sure where it went, but I was a Jackie Oates fanboy. I still am, probably, but Jackie is very, very. I'm very fond of Jackie. She's a key figure in my sort of early folk music playing, if not upbringing. So,
and she seems to have this particular fondness for Scottish songs and ballads as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's on there, her album called Jackie Oates, and it's also on Rachel Anthony, the Winterset, Cruel Sister. And then back to Scots again for the final one. People have heard me talk about, certainly people have seen my gigs, they've heard me talk about the first time I realised I wanted to sing folk songs for a living, which was at Whitby Folk Week and hearing the trio Shepherd, Spears and Watson. And Tom Spears from that trio did come out with a solo album, but also an album with his family, with his wife and daughter, called Plenty Brass and a Bonny Lass, which is a line. It is a line from a song on that album, which I ended up singing with the Dovetail Trio as well, my old band. But
what song is that?
That's from the song Greenland, I think, the green and whale fishery sort of variant stuff.
Yeah.
Although I didn't sing it, Jamie Roberts in our trio sang it, but I suggested it because it's from that album. Anyway, Emma Spears, that's Tom's daughter. I'm going to apologies if the Spears I got that wrong. But she learned it from Gordon McCulloch, and then it's on that album. So,
there
you go. A lot of Gordon McCulloch's got a lot to answer for. Basically.
Yeah, and Jock Duncan sang it as well, and I wonder where Jock Duncan got it from.
That's right. I would have mentioned that in the first half of the thing, but Jock, he did say because Ronnie Cairns did some sleeve notes to an album of Jock Duncan's recordings, and he said that Jock said a lass from Kinnenmouth sang it sent the song to Gavin Greig in 1898.
Right, yeah, so it goes right back to that,
So, this is, for listeners, this is one of the rare occasions when we're recording the singer half before the historical half. So, some of this might have been talked about already, but we don't know.
Okay.
But that's fine.
So it's in Greg Duncan's collection. It's in the Greg Duncan collection then somewhere. I don't have every volume of that massive collection. I've got 2 or 3 volumes, but I don't think I've got the one that has that.
A lass from Kinnenmouth sent it to Gavin Greig, 1898, from the singing of an octogenarian relative. So it obviously stems back a lot further than that in that line.
Yeah.
But I love all that stuff. That's really fascinating.
Apparently it was. There's a thing on the Kista Ritchie's website, the School of Scottish Studies website. I think it's a recording of Lizzie Higgins, and she says that it was her mother's favourite song, Jeannie Robertson's favourite song of all, and she wanted to hear Lizzie sing it when Jeannie was on her deathbed.
Wow.
She requested it on her deathbed, apparently.
Blimey. It's great when you get these traditional singers that are able to say this was my grandmother's favourite song, whatever, and then you can find they say, oh, I learned this from my mother, whatever. You have that in Sussex with the Copper family, because now we've got the young Coppers, as they were known, who are in their mid-40s, and some of their kids are now singing them, but the young Coppers in their 40s are Bob Copper's grandchildren, and Bob Copper's. I think it was his dad wrote all the songs down in the book that became the Copper Family Songbook. And I think he wrote down that he remembers his grandfather singing them. And so, it's great when you actually have proper evidence of that kind of line, that line of transmission,
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah.
But right, I think we'll leave that there. Thanks ever so much for coming on and
thank you.
Chatting about this stuff. We're recording this episode quite far in advance, but in terms of the 5th of March onwards, if people want to see you live or hear stuff, what have you got coming up over the next few weeks or months?
Well, it's quite a quiet period, really. I'm not really doing anything live until early May, and that happens to be in Amsterdam. Playing a gig with a Norwegian friend of mine, Frederick Raston, in Amsterdam on the 3rd of May. I mean, I probably will have some other gigs booked in before then. I hope so. I mean, I'm possibly going to be doing something at the folk film gathering in Edinburgh in May, sometime in the first couple of weeks of May.
Oh yeah,
it's a great sort of festival that shows a lot of sort of folk related films and has live performances. It's run by an organisation in Edinburgh called Transgressive North. Worth checking out their activities.
Oh great!
And then Furrow Collective is going to be touring more in the autumn of this year.
Any
autumn and winter?
Any summer folk festivals on the horizon?
Maybe late summer, early autumn. We're working on it. No, not really.
No, that's fine. That's all right.
But I mentioned my friend Donald Lindsay, Donald W.G. Lindsay, as his professional name, because there's another piper called Donald Lindsay.
Okay.
So an American piper. So to differentiate the two Donald Lindsays, he's put in the WG, the initials of his middle names. Donald and I are going to be touring in October or November as well. And also, recently I made a record in Nova Scotia with my friend Mary Morrison, who's a great Gaelic singer from the Isle of Lewis, and with a guy called Pete Johnson. It was Pete's idea to make this record, and it's he's from Nova Scotia, and it's a collection of songs and ballads from Nova Scotia, but most of them have kind of Scottish, antecedents, Scottish roots. So half the record is kind of Scots ballads, and then half is Gaelic songs, collected mostly in Nova Scotia and other parts of maritime Canada by a woman called Helen Creighton, a Canadian folklorist. So hopefully we'll be doing some gigs in the autumn as well to promote this new album that'll be coming out.
Right, well, an action-packed second half of the year. Yeah,
the first half is a little quiet, but I'm doing some residencies and things.
Oh, very good.
And then in the autumn, and more touring in the autumn. Yeah.
Lovely, fantastic. Well, that's been brilliant. And we'll hear the recording of you singing this song in just a few seconds. But in the meantime, Alasdair Roberts, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of this series. The prophecy doctor was walking her lane. Oh, but her love, it was easy won, when she heard a Scots prisoner a-macking his mane. Aye, and she was the floor of Northumberland, saying it's so gin a lassie would borrow a key. Oh, but her love, it was easy won, I would make her a lady o' high degree, if she'd loose me out fae this prison sae strang. Say she's gin her ben to her father's bedstocks. Oh, but her love, it was easy won, and she's stolen the best key there for money's a brolock, for to loose him out fae his prison sae strang. And she's gin her ben to her father's stable. Oh, but her love, it was easy won, and she's stolen the best horse that was baith fleet and able, for to carry them baith to bonny Scotland. And as they were riding across the Scots muir, he cried, oh, but your love, it was easy won. Get ye down fae my horse, you're a brazen-faced whore, although you're the floor of Northumberland. For it's a wife in my ain country. Oh, and your love, it was easy won, And I canny day Nathan wi' a lassie like thee, say you'll need to gang back to Northumberland. Well, 'tis cooking your kitchen I surely can be. Oh, but my love, it was easy won. And I'll serve your lady maist reverently, for I canna go back to my family. Well, 'tis cooking my kitchen, ye canna well be. Oh, but your love, it was easy won. For my lady, she will nae hae servants like thee, say you'll need to gang back to Northumberland. But laith was he, the lassie to time. Oh, but her love, it was easy won. So he's hired an old horse and he's feed an old man, for to carry her back to Northumberland. And when she come ben, her father did frown. He cried, oh, but your love, it was easy won. For to gang wi' a Scotsman when you're barely 16, I and you the fair floor of Northumberland. But when she come ben, her mother did smile. She said, oh, but your love, it was easy won. For you know the first lass that Thorn Scots has beguiled. See, you're welcome back hame to Northumberland. And you winna want bread, and ye winna want wine. Oh, but your love, it was easy won. And you winna want cellar to buy a man wi'. And you're aye the fair floor of Northumberland.
That was Alasdair Roberts singing The Fair Flower of Northumberland. And that brings us to the end of the episode. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the song? I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to drop me an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk, or you can visit the podcast on various social media platforms. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Just search for In the Roud, a folk song podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review on wherever you get your podcasts from. If you're listening on apps like Apple Podcasts, this is in the form of a little 5-star rating and a little review you can write. Only takes 30 seconds and it really helps the podcast to reach a wider audience. Same applies on YouTube as well, but there you can click subscribe and also just click the like button, the thumbs up button on the episode you happen to be listening to. Really appreciate that sort of thing very much. Another way you can support the podcast is financially. If you feel so moved, please do head on over to patreon.com/intheroud, and you can sign up for either £5 or £10 per month and receive weekly bonus content. I mean, even if you don't want to hear the bonus content, that's the place to support the podcast. Over on the Patreon, we're in the middle of our current Singer's Choice mini-season at the moment, with special guest Rachel McShane. Last week, we looked at her first choice, which was Roud 379, Green Broom. And this week, we're looking at the song labelled Roud 3448, a Scots song called Plumen Laddies. On the history side, I will be joined by Scottish singer and researcher Joe Miller. Sign up to hear this and more at patreon.com/intheroud. In the Roud is a media partner of Veteran, the traditional music label. Although this week's song doesn't currently feature on any of their releases, you can find details of their extensive catalogue on their website, veteran.co.uk. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Sandra Kerr and Alasdair Roberts. Join me next week for episode 6 of this season. We will be looking at Roud 26, which is Child Ballad 11, The Cruel Brother. On the history side, I will be joined by Martin Nail, and my singer guest will be Sophie Crawford. Until then, that's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.